Ultimately, being a female, we could argue all day long, men and women are the same. Physically, we're not. Even if a guy is shorter than me, physically, we're not. So if I have to defend myself against a guy, even if he's shorter, let's say there's 5 guys that break into my house, I live alone. What is giving me an equal chance to protect myself? And the only thing I could think of is a firearm.
There is a growing pro-gun movement that's centered here in Colorado. We're going to learn about that, but first, subscribe and like our channel. Click on that little bell icon for notifications. Find the Devil's Advocate podcast on your favorite platform. Ava Flanell, why are you so passionate about this?
Ultimately, I just want to be able to protect myself and allow others to do the same.
We had a state legislator who said that's why women have rape whistles and call boxes. Why in the world do you need a gun?
So I've done quite a bit of research. I lived in New York City for 8 years, and I've, researched, all right, let's do pepper spray, stun guns, even tasers. At one point, I actually wanted to review a taser and see how effective that was. And though I think tasers might be pretty effective when used properly, when I went to go use it, the battery went dead. And, so let's say I actually had to use that, in self-defense. If I didn't know that I accidentally left the battery on or that it had a battery life and I needed it, then, what good is that going to do? So I ultimately just feel that firearms are really the only thing that's going to level the playing field and that's going to be that equalizer that I need.
Now, you've heard my story before, which is I was anti-gun. I'm emotionally anti-gun, which is odd because I'm not an emotional guy, but on this one issue, it's like nobody needs these things. And it took my older brother, who had a lot more patience, when he bought a gun, and I thought he was crazy. It got me researching. It got me looking into things. It got me looking into the guns, the safeties, the statistics, and slowly the mystery went away, the fear went away. Did you have something similar to that? I mean, you lived in New York City. You must have hated guns at some point.
I'm actually kind of guilty. So I was raised around guns. The house that I grew up on was really close to a gun range. And my parents, although they were both from New York, they moved to Colorado, and shortly after they had a gun store. And growing up, I was very girly. I didn't want anything to do with guns. Not that I was anti-gun, but I was kind of scared of guns. Like, I just knew the power that they held. And I didn't want to, I just didn't want any accidents to happen. And so I just never touched it.
Even though you were raised around them, your father owned a gun shop and a gun range and all the rest, you still were a little
Yeah, and my parents they respected the fact that I didn't want anything to do with it, and so they just kind of left it alone.
What changed your mind?
So, honestly, what changed my mind is, so I lived in New York, and I stupidly kind of thought that I was safe in New York. I mean, I saw a lot of bad things happen, but I still thought that those bad things happen to other people. It doesn't happen to me. Sadly, 12 years ago, my mom passed away, and it happened right in front of me. And it was really horrific. And I'll admit, I had really bad PTSD. She died in June. I went back to New York for just a little bit. And that October, I was in New York, and they had a really bad hurricane. It was Hurricane Sandy. And I remember for the first time in my life, I went to the grocery store, and everybody was trying to get groceries off the shelf, and all the shelves were just empty, and everybody was in panic mode. And then the hurricane came, and it was, I was just reading the other day, it was actually one of the worst hurricanes that they'd ever seen, and it did the most damage. I mean, it was billions of dollars of damage. And I lived on 37th Street at the time, and everything from 34th Street down shut off. It got flooded. And the next day or 2 days after, I remember coming out of my apartment, and it was just so desolate. And it was kind of like everyone was out for themselves. And I think when you are in a situation like that, and I think after witnessing, my mom dying and realizing that okay, suddenly wow, this can happen to you. You're suddenly you're not untouchable. And then, just a few months later, kind of being in a situation like that, which I've experienced other things like Y2K, which I don't even remember. That was like, somebody asked me, well, weren't you part of that? And I was like, I mean, I don't remember that at all. Certain things like that, then you're just like, wow, like people, when you're in situations and people are kind of fending for themselves and their families, then things get a little crazy. And I think a lot of people saw that during COVID too. That's when we saw the most gun sales. Gun sales like skyrocketed. And I'm also a firearms instructor. And that's when we saw the most trainings. I mean, I had people that had admitted that they had always voted Democrat, they'd always been anti-gun. And during COVID, during these crazy times when you couldn't get toilet paper, but also other crazy things were happening, that they were just like, okay, well, what is going to happen when things get scarce?
Crazy things do happen. I think about Katrina, the looting that happened afterwards, the stores that were defended by people who had guns were not looted.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. All right, let's fast forward.
But ultimately, being a female, we could argue all day long, men and women are the same. Physically, we're not. Even if a guy is shorter than me, physically, we're not. So if I have to defend myself against a guy, even if he's shorter, let's say there's 5 guys that break into my house, I live alone. What is giving me an equal chance to protect myself? And the only thing I could think of is a firearm.
Let's fast forward. Right now, I know you don't like the term, but you are a major influencer in this world. You have a podcast that is heard by tens of thousands of people. The name of it is?
Gun Funny.
Gun Funny.
Yeah.
Why did you start Gun Funny?
So I wanted to humanize the gun industry. And it's actually a play on Gun Bunny, which I don't think you'd understand unless you were in the firearms industry. But I realized that other people had stories similar to mine, like, why they got into the gun industry. For me, I ultimately got into the gun industry initially, not because I felt like I needed to protect myself. It was because my mom passed away. I moved, I moved from New York back to Colorado to help with the family business. And that's ultimately how I got into the firearms industry. And then it just kind of, led from one thing to the other. But I as I talked to more people, I realized that they had other stories as to how they got into guns. So I wanted to humanize the industry, and I thought that people had a good story to tell or how they created a business. And I wanted to sort of give life to that. So I interview people. I also eventually added a political aspect because I realized pretty quickly that people had no idea what was going on in the industry. It's kind of like, if you work in the tech industry, if you're like, oh, did you hear what happened at Microsoft? I have no idea. I don't know unless it's like plastered all over the newspaper. I have no idea. So I wanted to educate people on what was going on in politics and what was affecting their Second Amendment rights. And most people have no idea what's going on.
Let me put it this way. I don't know how to do it. Gun rights people, gunnies, are the worst spokesmen for gun rights. This is what I found always, that some guy wearing camouflage with a beard and a Budweiser screaming, "Out of my cold, dead hands," convinces no one who isn't already convinced.
Yeah.
There is a ton of mansplaining that happens in the gun world. Oh, this is what you want. And they're into their guns, which is great. But I found most gunnies are terrible salesmen. And there is a huge opportunity, particularly for women who feel more endangered now than they have in a long time, and with concealed carry permits, to welcome people into this world that are curious about it, but easily scared because you have to get over the emotional hump of, wait a second, if I don't look at this emotionally. I mean, it reminds me of people who are fearful of planes. And I used to be fearful of planes. And then at one point I said, this is ridiculous. This is the safest mode of travel by every measurement. And so just go. And I'm no longer, when you look at things rationally, fear melts. What excites me about what you're doing here is that I think it does that your audience is different and you speak in a very different way.
Absolutely. I think when you take the fear factor out of it, when you address things, when you're like, even being a firearms instructor, and teaching people. I've taught so many people that, have cried in my classroom. We haven't even made it to the range yet. And they cried because they're just like, oh, I'm really nervous. And it's like, okay, I understand. Because I was at that point too. I was nervous.
Why are they crying? Help me out.
Because they were taught their entire lives that guns are bad.
Here's the difference. When I felt about those guns, I saw guns as a swastika, that it represented something, that it's just a thing. It's just a tool. It's just a bit of machinery. It doesn't have free will.
Yes.
And it does take a while to get over that. What happens after you get a woman over that fear of it? How do they feel later?
Oh,
usually?
Honestly, then they take up more classes. They end up buying more guns. I mean, once you could see they're empowered, they now have control over their ability to protect themselves. It's so freeing. The fact that, it doesn't mean like, cool, now you can go down a dark alley and do whatever you want because you have this gun. You still want to, be careful, but it's just, I've always said that knowledge is, if you can educate people, you have the ability to take away so much fear. There's so much, so much that we've been conditioned to believe. And once you educate yourself.
You used a word empowered, that they go from crying to feeling empowered. What makes that transition? Is it just that they can actually hit a target, or is it that they've pulled the trigger and survived? What do you think makes that from after the training to feeling empowered?
That's a good question. I think it's just a little bit, it's all of the above. I think it's the fact that they are, they're able to pick up this gun and realize that, they're in control of this firearm, that it's not just going to go off and hurt somebody. And I've always said, okay, you could have all the safeties on a gun. Ultimately, you're going to be your biggest safety. This gun's not going to go off by itself. And then the fact that they have control over this gun, and that if you...
That's the point. I think that's it. Pardon me for interrupting, but that before the training, the gun gave you fear. Once you learn to use the gun and realize, just like driving your car, you are in control. That is the definition of empowerment. Yeah. So what was fearful now is under your control and a useful tool for you for all sorts, whether it's recreation or target shooting or hunting or self-defense or defending your family. Now you have that control. And I've met no one who has gone the other way, which is, now I used to, a woman who's, I used to have a gun, now I hate it. No, I haven't seen it.
No, I haven't either. And I've taught thousands of people.
I started getting familiar with your work during the gun debates in Colorado last year. You, your father, your sister, all did wonderful videos or updates. And they were spot on updates on what was going on in the state capitol. And for a junkie like me, I know what's going on. I'm there, I see it, I hear it. But for most Coloradans, most people around the country, they don't know. Why did you become a reporter and opinion person other than just talking about how fun it is to shoot a gun? So
I was at the Capitol and waiting for my name to be called to testify.
Get your 2 minutes of glory.
Right? Yeah, waiting hours. I realized, I'm like, nobody's doing anything. And half these people have no idea what's going on. And then even just to sign up to testify was super confusing. And then also just the, how this bill is being made. And I kept asking questions, and half these people had no idea how to answer my questions. And I just realized, I'm like, how is it so hard to even answer these questions? And does anybody know what's going on?
What kind of questions?
It was just okay, so what happens next? So they pass this.
Procedural stuff. Where do I testify? How do I testify? What happens to the bill afterwards?
Exactly.
Who should I talk to next?
Okay, so yeah, exactly. Right. So it's heard of, so the committee just voted on this, and now what happens? Where does it go from here? Does this mean that it's, okay, they just voted on it? Is this bill now going to be going on the governor's desk? Stuff like that nobody could answer for me. And it was so frustrating. And so as I was learning, I'm like, we need to share this information to the general public, because I'm sure that I'm not the only person who has these questions. And sure enough, I wasn't. And so I thought that it was important. And I got my sister involved because, and this happened last year. Last year during the quote unquote assault weapons ban bill, that's when we needed all hands on deck, and we needed females. I asked my sister to go up and testify because it was important for us to get females up there, especially when we were going up against Moms Demand Action. And so my sister went up and she got a taste of it. And I think she saw what I saw. And then she started going up and testifying with me. And if I couldn't make it, she could make it. And we ended up testifying against pretty much every gun bill that they came at us with, which I think, this legislative session, they came at us with like 10 anti-gun bills.
It was the worst I've ever seen. I've spent my life in Colorado.
Yeah.
But the point to get women involved in gun ownership, but then to get them involved in gun activism is something that feels somewhat unnatural. But it's the most powerful voices there are for sanity in this debate are women, because it's women who have been feeding the fear on the other side and putting out these lies from Mothers Demand Action and others that needs to be corrected. And I can correct it all the time, but having other women go, no, that's not quite true. I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, especially women that work in this industry.
And you do gun reviews and all the rest, so you understand this. And your family owns this incredible facility down south. It's got a huge museum. It's got rifle ranges. You do events. It's pretty amazing. And your father goes by the handle Dragon Man.
Yeah.
And he has a huge following, and your sister has a huge following. So it's I guess influencing has become a family business.
Yes, yes.
After you did this, I think you ran into a friend of mine. Her name is Leslie Hollywood. And she is also an articulate woman for gun rights. You guys are starting to scheme a bit. What are you working on?
So we've been friends for a few years now. We actually had not met in person up until this year. It's funny how many internet friends I've accumulated without meeting them in person. And we were talking and just, saying how fed up we are with just how little has been done and how much more can be done. And we've decided to we created an IEC, which is an Independent Expenditure Committee. It's essentially like a super PAC, a political action committee. And after doing some research, we realized that as of 2020, they did a lot of redistricting, which essentially made both parties upset, which kind of makes me think that they were doing maybe something right if it made both parties upset. But after doing some research, we identified 16 House districts where the Democrats won by 8.5% or less. Most of them not even that high. Most of them, I want to say it was like maybe 5% or less. And then we also identified quite a few Senate districts. There was actually 6, 3 that are held by Republicans and 3 that are held by Democrats. And ultimately, right now, we are fundraising and we want to campaign so that we can flip seats and get more Republicans in those districts.
Let me push you on that. Why Republicans?
So
aren't there any Democrats who feel the same way you feel on guns?
There, absolutely. So actually, I did meet with one Democrat, Shannon Bird, and I thought she's a wonderful woman. She met with me, I met with her aide. I talked to her quite a bit during the legislative session, and then I met with her right after the legislative session. And she told me that the reason why she voted no for majority of the anti-gun bills was because of the information that I gave her, and she wanted to thank me for that.
How did that make you feel? Just let's go to the emotion side of that.
It was amazing. I mean, it felt like a lot of the hard work that I put in was
that somebody was actually listening.
Yeah,
and thinking.
So I actually wish that more Democrats were like her. I've even put out that even if any of the Moms Demand Action women, any Democrats, any people, Democrats aside, anybody who was anti-gun, if anybody who was anti-gun, if anybody wanted to speak with me, I was willing to speak with them because I think that needs to be done as well. But that was amazing, and I wish more Democrats were like her. Shannon is not in one of those swing districts, but ultimately, why we are trying to get Republicans in these seats is because Democrats hold a supermajority. And so with all of these outrageous bills that Democrats came out with this year, if Democrats did not hold the supermajority, we would not constantly have to be playing defense. And that's ultimately, so the IEC is called Balancing the Rockies. And we're essentially trying to balance the playing field so that we are not going to be playing defense. I don't know if you know this, but as of 2019, the Democrats have now passed almost, if not more than 20 anti-gun bills.
In a state that used to be remarkably pro-gun. You'll hear me say this all the time, which is politics is a lagging indicator of culture. And culture drives political change. At the end of the day, the state has changed. Our cities have become much more anti-gun, much more anti-liberty, much more anti-free speech as well. The rural areas stay the rural areas, and there's this incredible war between the urbanites and the rural folks, and now the tiebreaker are suburban voters, and they're scared of guns. And I get that. I mean, I used to be there, but are you also working on the public perception in those swing areas on this issue?
It's funny you asked that because I just wrote an article about encouraging people to register to vote, but also to pay attention to local politics because we get so wrapped up in national politics. And I think that a lot of people have actually just given up on voting altogether.
That's one of the reasons, part of jumping in again, it's one of the reasons your video updates, you and your sister and your father, were so important because we all look to DC. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? They're going to do this, they're going to do that. When in fact, it's our cities now that have the ability to write their own gun laws and our state. So getting people involved locally was huge.
Absolutely.
Do you think you brought people in to testify?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There were so many people when I was at the Capitol that came up to me and they were like, I'm here because of your video. And they're like, I don't even know what I'm going to say yet, but I'm here because of you. And that was like so great to hear. And then I would like sit down with them and I'm like, all right, so like, let's figure out what you're going to say. But it was nice. I mean, people just showed up. Like they didn't even know what they were going to say and they just showed up.
So you're helping these people come in and get active in this. What do you tell them to do? More importantly, I'm really curious, what do you tell them maybe not to do?
Okay, so that's a great question. Towards the end of the legislative session, when we were down to the last week of the quote-unquote assault weapons ban bill, and Tom Sullivan was our swing vote. And anybody who knows Tom Sullivan...
This is the representative, a senator who lost his son in a mass shooting in the Aurora theater. And he's passionate, and he wants these guns banned.
Absolutely.
I couldn't think of anybody more opposite you on this issue battling.
Absolutely. In a way, I mean, think about it. So I'm working from my mom's legacy. She essentially created this business with my dad, and and Tom's working for his son's legacy. I mean, in some ways, I can almost kind of relate to Moms Demand Action. They lost they lost a loved one. I lost a loved one. Like, there's some ways that I could actually relate to a lot of these people. And so I try to put myself in Tom's shoes, and it's like, and Leslie and I, when we put out this video, as much as people want to be mean to him, I'm like, come on, guys, like, we need to be sincere about it. We need to, I think by putting out that video and telling people to give him some grace, we had so many people write in and say that because of our video, they did take a step back, as much as they wanted to come after him at first and just say, like, he had no right voting on it. He needed to take out his emotions from it. They took a step back and they wrote out a really, a much nicer letter. And I think that it actually had a better effect. What
I'm hearing is you took your enemy, political enemy, opponent, and humanized him. This is the opposite of politics as usual, which is the politics of personal destruction, which is insult him, we're going to find out things about him, and to say, wait a second, the guy lost his son.
Yeah.
Of course he feels strongly about this. But for the grace of God, that could be you.
Exactly.
And by doing that and talking to him in a different way.
Well, as a human.
As a human, not just a
politician.
Right. Did that gain anything?
I mean, honestly,
other than
who
being
knows?
the right thing to do.
Who knows if it worked or not? You know, if it did. I mean, who knows if he even read the letters? To be honest with you, but the bill was stopped.
And how did he vote?
So from my understanding, he voted no. The bill was killed.
He did vote no. Now, I don't think you turned him around on this. I believe he's come to the conclusion that a state assault weapon ban does nothing because
it would create a black market, and yeah.
Which, by the way, if you take that logic, that happens then to every state law. You know, the ridiculous magazine ban that we have here, that you can only have 15 rounds. That's a state law, and then cities are trying to do even smaller ones. What? You can't run up to Wyoming to get it? You can't bring it in? No. And how do you prove where you got it? I remember when that ban came in, the promise was, we are not going to ban any guns. This is not a gun ban thing. And I love that because it's obviously from people who know nothing about guns.
Yes.
So I can name 20 different models of guns that the factory magazine is 16 rounds or more. So yeah, you can buy the gun. You just can never use it legally because it takes the smallest capacity magazine it has from the manufacturer is this. And I'm not going to buy an aftermarket magazine for a gun. I want it to work. You must know this from selling guns. How many guns do you think there are that are now effectively banned in Colorado?
Oh, I mean, a lot. I mean, how effective is that ban?
No, I think somebody ought to have a list of, all the, I used to be able to name like 10 of them. Yeah, there's actually model numbers that are available everywhere in the country except Colorado and California and Massachusetts. I never thought that would be us.
Yeah.
Proving the lie that this is not gun control.
No.
The magazine ban was completely about stopping gun ownership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sullivan voted against it, I believe, because he said we need a national ban. I wish he would use that logic in other places on gun laws, but it didn't stop. It helped stop the bill. Is it coming back next year, do you think?
I've heard it is not, but I don't trust anything anymore. I mean, look at last year. Look how many anti-gun bills came our way. We could barely keep up. I felt like I was at the Capitol every other week. It was a full-time job. I don't know what they're going to come after us with. I definitely think they're going to try to they're probably going to try to ban bump stocks because that just got overturned. So now it's up to the state if they want to ban it.
The fight never stops.
No, it's not. And people, I know people are tired. People have constantly said it's like this is never ending, and it may never be end. It may never end. But for me, I think this is definitely something that's worth fighting for.
The governor and I disagree on just about everything, but he knows right from wrong on gun issues. He still signs these anti-gun bills because he has to be politically expedient. Also, if he has one eye to the White House, he will never make it through a Democratic primary for president, being the guy who vetoes an assault weapon ban. So I believe, and I can't prove, but I believe he's been working behind the scenes to try to kill those bills and sign the other ones because he doesn't want it on his desk.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I hope it stays that way. But remember, we've only got 2 more years of Governor Polis, and then we don't know what's going to happen. People want to learn more about what you do and how you do it. First, tell me a little bit about the podcast. The name again is
Gun Funny.
Gun Funny. Is a gun bunny one of the hot women who shoot guns on videos? Is that what gun bunnies are?
Yeah, but they're usually half naked. And so at the time I was making fun of those women, but I've since changed my stance on that because I will take women like that any day versus women who are anti-gun.
Really? So you don't find it exploitative to
I
have
do.
Girls in bikinis shooting machine guns?
No, absolutely, I do, and I can't stand it because there's women like me that are working their butts off to be taken seriously, and I don't think that we should have to sexualize ourselves to get attention or, But again, if I were to, if I had to choose between being in a room filled with gun bunnies versus women that hate guns, I think I'd rather hang out with a bunch of gun bunnies.
That's a great name. So it's Gun Funny.
Gun Funny.
And you can find the podcast pretty much any place on the site.
Yep, it's everywhere.
Tell me about the video work, though. You've also got an incredible video presence on Instagram and a fair amount of followers on YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube I post whenever I'm bored. I mean, I only have like 60-something thousand on YouTube, but
only 60,000.
I know that I say
only
that,
60,000. I don't even know why I'm talking to you.
But so really, if you just search for my name, Ava Flanell, but just keep in mind my last name is spelt with one N and two L's. So and Instagram, I am really shadow banned. So it's Ava, AVA, F as in Frank, LANELL _, and you have to write out the entire thing, including the underscore, and it's the only profile with a picture, and then you'll find it.
What was your most popular video?
Actually, so people love when I testify and I put a video, everybody loves to see, like, I would think that me getting politically active would just bore people.
So it's not you shooting a gun, it's not you reviewing a gun, it's not you training somebody to shoot a gun, it's you sitting at a table telling us why this is a bad move.
Yeah, people are honestly, like on Instagram and stuff, that's probably my most interacted stuff, which is crazy to me.
Why does that surprise you?
Because people don't seem to be interested when it comes to politics. Nobody's active anymore. I mean, I'm pulling teeth trying to get people just to register to vote or to even get them to want to vote.
I find it really encouraging because when you testify, you are trying to convince people who hate your position that maybe they're wrong. And I think, maybe I'm wrong on this, that there are a bunch of people who want to know how to talk about guns to people who are anti-gun. And they want to know how to present themselves. They want to know how to score the points. But more importantly, actually win the hearts and minds, to get somebody like me to switch their mind. I did. If I can, anyone can. So really what you're doing is how-to videos on talking guns.
Yeah, so there's actually going to be more of that. I can't say what's coming up, but there's something that's going to be in the works. And I'm definitely going to be doing more of that. So I'm definitely going to be getting more active and lots more like how-to videos, because I think that we definitely need to get a lot more active. And yes, I'm very active in Colorado, but I think that people can take what I'm doing, even on the political front, even with the, changing districts. I think that if we're effective here in Colorado, they can take this blueprint and apply it to other states. Because I think that, unfortunately, Republicans just aren't aware of how close we are in a lot of these districts. And I think if they can use this information and see how Democrats are doing it, I think that we can make a lot more difference nationwide.
All politics is addition. You bring together coalitions that might hate each other but on this one issue have some overlap. I think there are a lot of gun groups that want victory by subtraction. You can't do that. You can't say, you're not pure enough. No, you're too bad. No, this guy's awful. We need all of it, and we need to talk to people who don't understand it. You've also talked about teaching people just the process.
Yeah.
You even mentioned parking once. You said,
yeah,
people don't know where to park.
No, I mean, it's incredible. Like, I didn't know where to park. We're going to downtown Denver. Where the hell do I park? And, so, okay, there's metered parking. I might be here for 10 hours. Metered parking, that's only going to last so long. How much am I going to have to pay? And there's places where you could use like Spot Hero. It's an app. You can, figure it out the night before. It tells you exactly where you're going to go, how much you're going to pay. It'll be like $10 for the entire day. But stuff like that, I want to start educating people so that they're prepared. And we're going to take out that fear so that people are more prepared and organized. And it makes the entire process a lot more seamless.
Politics Activism 101.
Yes.
That's great stuff.
It needs to happen, though.
People want to get involved in the IEC. Where do they go?
They could go to balancingtherockies.com. And for
And this is all about the Colorado Rockies and your effort to try to get a better picture.
Yes. And for bigger donors, if they want to see the entire, I mean, we've put together, like, we could get crazy with the amount of information that we put together, graphs with districts and everything. If they want to see all of that for the bigger donors, just email us and we are happy to share.
Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I know you say you've just started this, but you handle it like an old pro.
Thank you.
And in 2 years, you're going to look like this.
I know. I already have to get my hair dyed every 4 weeks because some grays are popping up.
Ava, thanks so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.